Hi guys, this is week 10 Project Life, and this week I'm basically going to create my entire spread just using these two stamp sets from Kellie Stamps. I've got the Around Here set and the Rose Ave Alpha. Now I've just dug into my stash and pulled out a bunch of pre-cut 3x4 and 4x6 just plain white cards, and I'm going to get a little bit stamp happy and create my own patterns on these cards. I didn't have any kits or anything to work with this week. I really wanted to challenge myself to just use these stamp sets. So I'm starting out with a 3x4 card, and I've applied my clear stamp onto my block on a diagonal, and then as I'm stamping I'm going to be super careful to make sure that I keep my stamp block straight onto the card, and that way I end up with this diagonal repeat stamping and everything stays at the same angle. Now I pulled out a bunch of these ombre Hero Arts ink pads. You can totally replicate this just by using 3 different shades of the same color, but it is super handy having the 3 shades in one ink pad like this. So as I'm working my way up from the bottom of the card, I started with the lightest color, and sort of about a third of the way up I moved on to the middle color, and then here at the top I'm going to stamp with the darkest color on that stamp pad. And it just adds that tiny little bit of variance. It really does make a huge difference, I think, in the way that a really simple stamped card like this looks, just to have that tiny ombre going on. You could also get the same sort of effect by alternating colors and create a rainbow stripe. There's so many things you can do, and I do love using my stamps like this. Now these cards I'm going to keep super simple today. I'm just sticking down my photo, which is, I think it's roughly about a 2.5 inch square, and then I'm adding a little bit of washi tape to the top. I am actually adhering that photo down, so the washi tape is literally just for decoration. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing on this 3x4 card, and I want to make sure that I get the angle the same. So what I did is laid the cleared stamp down on the card that I had already stamped, and then adhered it to my block from there. And that way I just make sure that I get that exact same angle, and I repeated the exact same process, just this time I used some teal inks instead of those coral ones. Now again, I'm choosing a little bit of washi tape. I'm using all sorts of colors this week, so I'm just picking a washi tape that kind of contrasts with the color of the stamping that I've used. That's why I've got my whole wheel of washi tapes out there. I'm just no particular color scheme, just whichever one works with the photo in the background. Now I'm going to do the same technique on this 4x6 card, and the reason I've got a 4x6 is because I had an extra 3x4 photo this week, and so I'm going to use the 4x6 card to adhere that 3x4 photo on. So you're only going to see half of the stamping on this card, which means I only have to stamp the left hand side. So I'm just going to make sure that I've stamped enough that there's not going to be any blank space, and then I can just carry on working up. The only difference with this card is they haven't done that ombre effect. It's already going to have another photo stuck to it, so I've just stuck with the one color. The blue works really nicely with the 3x4 that's right next to it and contrasts with the photo that I'm actually sticking on there. And just for a little pop of color, I am going to use a bright pink washi tape there just to highlight that photo a little bit. Now because I decided to work with just stamps today, I don't have any embellishments, so I'm going to kind of create some really simple embellishments of my own using this half label stamp that's in the Around Here stamp set. Now I will say, if you're a little bit lax of cleaning off your stamps like I am, these Hero Arts ink pads are actually really good for removing any staining that's on your stamps. So just note that if there is some color residue on your stamp, it can pay to stamp a couple of times on some scrap paper just before you stamp onto your final piece with these Hero Arts inks, because they will remove the color that's already on there. So that's one little tip for you. You can see here the stamping with that bright pink and then the pale green afterwards produced some really funky colors. So I've just pulled out a little scrap paper, and I'm going to stamp off on that before I stamp onto my final piece here. Basically all I'm doing is just creating a card that's full of these labels so that I've got a wide range of color choices as I go about trying to embellish my page here. I don't know what colors I'm going to need, so I'm doing all of them, all of the ink colors that I already had pulled out on my desk. Now these are really fun, these little half sort of labels. You could always stamp one up one way and one around the other. That would give you a full label, but I really love the look of these half labels. So I'm going to do a little recipe on here like I usually do when I'm trying to keep things simple and easy. I have already got these labels stamped out, so I'm picking a color that's going to go nicely with my photo, and then I'm stamping one of the littlest sentiments from the same stamp set on there, just in a black ink, and then I've trimmed that out. And before I stick it down, I'm going to stamp out a word onto my my photo here. I'm stamping directly onto my photo. I print at home on Canon Photo Glossy 2 paper, which means it's excellent for directly stamping onto photos, and I'm using the Brilliance Moonlight White ink just to stamp a little word, and then I added my label just overhanging that word just a little bit to create some kind of layers in there, a little bit of interest, just to keep things, because I've got these really simple embellishments, it just adds that little bit extra to it. So as it being a recipe, I'm going to do the same thing down here on this other 4x6 photo. There's less of a sort of blank space for stamping on here, so I'm going to keep the word really short, and I'm also going to stamp this time in a little bit of colored ink. Obviously it's a really white photo, the white would definitely not stand out on there, but I also didn't want to make it too heavy by stamping in black, so I am using those Hero Arts inks, and they do stamp okay on this photo paper as well. So I stamped my little word, and then I'm going to add my label to the top of it. Obviously one is at the top of a photo and one is at the bottom, so you do need to bear that in mind when you stamp your sentiment onto these half labels, but I think it looked really fun when it was finished. Now I'm just going to move on to my title card. I had a fun idea to do some more repeat stamping on here using my title, but I just want to do a tiny bit of planning to make sure that this is going to work. I'm going to stamp out week 10, and I want it to be exactly in the middle of my card. So the easiest way to do that is to just stamp that onto a scrap paper first, and then I'm going to use my alpha guide here to work out where the center of that title is, and then I'll be able to match that when I do my stamping on top of my title card. So again, I'm just cleaning off some of those dirtier stamps so that when I stamp onto my actual title card, things are as clean as they possibly can be. And just working out where the middle mark is, which alpha is going to have to go into the middle here. And then I can start stamping, and I'm going to work my way out from the middle. Obviously, if you had more than one E in a stamp set, you'd be able to do this all in one go, but I needed 3 for this title, so this was the easiest way to make sure that everything was centered. I've stamped the word week, and then I'm going to work in from the other side just to make sure I get those margins on the card correct. I'd rather have a larger gap in the middle than it not fit. And then I'm going to add another label onto here. So I'm going to stamp my label onto the card. I'm just working out what color I might want to do that in. I'm going to stamp that. I'm not going to use one of those ones that I had already trimmed out. I'm just using that to work out which color I want to use, and then I'm going to stamp that directly onto this card. So the card's going to be a whole single layer card using just those stamp sets. I can go ahead and just stamp my date stamps on here. It's a smaller label, so I'm being really careful about how much fits onto here. I did need to fit 2 dates on there. I did mess up the stamping just a tiny little bit. I was using one of the backs of the stamps, that sort of clear acetate, as a mask, and I didn't quite get it in the right place. So I just used a white gel pen just to disguise that mistake a little bit before I added my heart on top. Now the repeat part of this card comes in here, is that I am going to keep stamping week 10. This time it's less important about where that starts. I am going to keep stamping week 10 all over this card, and I do have to do that kind of one letter at a time basically. So I am starting one word on top and one word underneath, and that way I can kind of double up the letters that I'm using and just carry on stamping until all of that is stamped in. Because I used that pink ink before I started stamping with this really pale blue, I am making sure that each letter I use I clean off just a little bit so that I don't get that weird kind of color shading. This is super difficult for you to see because I am using a really light, I think it's called soft pull. It's a very light blue. It is easier to see in real life than it is here on camera, I can assure you. I did just use one of those labels that I had stamped before as a mask, so there is no stamping underneath where the label is stamped. It did take a little while, but is quicker than you think, and then I can move on with the rest of my page. Now the last thing I want to do to this page is I'm just going to add another really simple sentiment stamp to the 3 4x3 photos that I have here. I'm going to do all of those in the Brilliance Moonlight White again, just because they've all got sort of spaces that fit those sentiments on there, and I love that look of white stamping on top of the photos. I did think about maybe stamping the labels on there as well, but I already have 3, and I think that's kind of a good rule of thumb is 3 works nicely on a layout like this. I've got 3 labels, I've got 3 pieces of washi tape, I'm going to have 3 of these stamps on photos, and I just think that looks really fun. I really love how this page came out, and I love that I get a little bit more use out of my stamps when I force myself to do a challenge like this. All of these stamps are available at Kellie Stamps right now. Check out the description box for a discount code if you want to grab some for yourself. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you want to keep watching, there are a couple more videos on screen, or why not check out my Patreon page? There are even more videos over there. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye guys.